Hi there, it's Charmaine Hammond with the Global Influence Summit. And I'm really, really excited today, partly because the Global Influence Summit is around the corner, more so because I get to spend some time with an amazing sponsor of the Global Influence Summit. With me, you see Ann Dickinson, whose business is Eye on Your Business. And I was connected, the Global Influence Summit was connected to Ann through Joseph Ranseth, who you all know and appreciate as much as we do, one of the partners of the summit. And, he talked to us about how important the work is that Ann is doing to help businesses be profitable. And when of course, you know me, I go and check people out. So before the phone call with Ann, I was kind of stalking her on social media and checking and reading her blogs. And one of the things that really, really made me feel connected to you was your commitment in helping entrepreneurs really not only make a successful business, but a profitable business, a thriving business. And it saddens me, like I'm sure it does you, to see so many entrepreneurs have a big dream, a big passion, and they don't have the financial side of their business in place, and the dream kind of unfolds and it fizzles, and important work in the world doesn't get done. So thank you, first of all, for being a sponsor of the Global Influence Summit.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm super excited about the event.
Me too. So let's dive in. Let's talk about, so one of the terms you use a lot on your website and in your social media and in your articles and blogs and the interviews you do on media, you use the word profit leaks. So I kind of think I understand what that means, but I would love for you to share your definition, because what I'm learning about Ann Dickinson is just when I think I understand what it means, Ann comes in and tells me what something really means. So what do you mean by profit leaks?
So I define a profit leak as anything that's happening in your business that's keeping the profit from being as big as it could be. So for instance, it can be revenue opportunities that aren't being capitalized on. It can be expenses that are happening that don't need to. It can even be really process issues that impact how things are being done, which ultimately lead to a drain in profit, right? You're not working the company as effectively and as efficiently and as profitably as it's possible to do.
Gotcha. So. When you've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, you speak, you train, you write, you do webinars. Are there some profit leak examples that seem to be common in the entrepreneur space?
Well, I'll tell you, for the new entrepreneur, the biggest one that I find is flat out not keeping your books. Right? And so my mission is that business owners have actionable information that they can use to make better, smarter, quicker, more effective decisions. And that's not possible if you don't have your books up to date to be able to use the information.
Yeah.
And so a lot of entrepreneurs, and even up to, a fairly sizable business, they'll use the bank balance. I'll just go check the bank balance. If there's money in the bank, then I'm good. But it doesn't give them the information, for instance, that says, okay, I brought in this much money on product A, B, C, D, and E, and my expenses against those were whatever, and my marketing costs were something, and there's no categorization, there's no understanding of the underlying information, right? And so if you don't have good information, there's no way you can make good decisions. It's just not possible.
I love that you raised that, Ann, and you brought me back to a scenario that goes back about, 20 years ago, not long after I opened my business. And we were doing a particular training program for government. And, initially it seemed like this was a really good revenue generator. It was the same course, they paid on time. It seemed like a really good revenue generator. We weren't doing at that time what you just talked about, Ann. So we did the training, we invoiced, the money went in the bank, we did the training, we invoiced. And then I remember thinking, why is the bank account not dramatically increasing? This is a really lucrative contract that we had signed. And my husband and I sat down, we thought, man, this is a very expensive contract to have, the way that had written the contract, and we didn't think through some of the expenses. So everybody had a massive training binder, and they had all these books and resources that were coming out of our expense. And so when we finally clued in, because you weren't in my life then, Anne,
I'm sorry,
and did what you said, it actually was a contract we didn't renew. And it was really hard, though, to part with this lucrative contract, because there's that money coming in. But
lucrative, but not profitable.
That's the difference. That's it.
Right. And so it's it takes some business owners sometimes a bit to recognize, you know what, if you can have pick a number, $1 million, $5 million, $50 million, $100 million company, but if there's nothing, and that reference is always to the revenue line, what's coming in the door, right?
Yeah.
What are the orders? If there's nothing at the end of the day, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
What's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Right? The point is to have some stuff left over at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can get into a lot of dancing around regarding taxes and strategically dealing with those, and that's all fine. But, that aside, the objective is to have stuff left over at the end.
Beautiful. And that's what you do in Eye on Your Business. I wanted to get everyone super jazzed up about this hot topic we're talking about. And now I want to give you the opportunity to tell people more about what Eye on Your Business does. I mean, I'm one of the things I'm loving about your business that I'm learning, you are so niched into a very specific way that you work with entrepreneurs and businesses to help them avoid profit leaks and to be profitable and become a thriving business. So tell us more about Eye on Your Business and what you do and how you help entrepreneurs and small businesses.
So Eye on Your Business is a consulting firm, and my mission really is to work with established service business owners to help them get more money in the form of profit and cash flow, more time in the form of less stress, and more freedom, which is kind of priceless. Yeah. And it's really all about, well, as I said previously, running the company as efficiently and as effectively as possible. And part of that means, I'll give you an example. I have a client, happens to be an attorney, solo attorney. And when we got together about 15 months ago, she was doing, an okay amount of business. Not, let's face it, it was about 6 figures. Not a huge amount of business, and people think lawyers are all rich. Well, they're not all rich. But she was carrying debt. She was tearing her hair out because she knows the law. She didn't know the business side of the equation. Right? People learn their strong suit, but they don't always learn the business side. Right. That's what I'm here for. And so we spent time, and frankly, one of the first things we did, aside from, I start with the numbers and I go in and say, okay, what's going on? And basically start the 48,256 questions. That's not a real number. And one of the first things I actually asked her to do was to track her time. Now, we know attorneys all can track client time down to milliseconds, but I asked her to track all of her time, right? She's a solo attorney. How's she spending her time? And it fell principally into 3 buckets: client time, marketing, and administrative. And the percentages were 25% of her time was spent on client work. Okay, that sounds okay. 30% on marketing, and fully 45% on administrative. She's a lawyer.
Right.
And so if that isn't a profit leak, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Right? But it's not necessarily intuitively obvious. You've got to do some digging. And, fast forward, and I'll skip the long story, but fast forward a year, she did about, 6 figures in whatever year that would have been, 2016, I guess. Last year, she came within so close to $250,000 of profitable, debt-free business.
Wow.
And part of that was saying, wait a second, I should be spending my time someplace else. Because further analysis said, well, wait a second, your effective billable rate is $700 an hour the way you're charging.
Right.
And so you're doing, $20 an hour stuff for 3/4 of the day? I don't think so. Right?
Wow.
And so redirecting and looking at other pieces of the puzzle.
Man, I want to stop there for a second because that is such a juicy tip. And thank you for sharing that story because it makes it real for us. And, I love the idea of tracking your time because I think as entrepreneurs, and I'm guilty of this, Anne, I will be vulnerable here. There are many days where I can think, wow, man, that day went by fast. And then the question is, how much time did I spend on clients, on developing the business, on marketing? And I love how you challenged your client to actually really track the time, because I imagine that must have been, your client probably didn't realize where the time was going till you helped. Is that fair?
I think certainly not to the extent, right? She was tearing her hair out because she wasn't quite sure. She knew something was off, but she didn't know what it was, right? So, you just got to bring in a third eye into a business, an outside perspective can be hugely beneficial.
Yeah.
Because everyone's too close to it. I'm too close to my business. It's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
So
if we were to challenge people to go away and track their time for like a day or a week, what would you recommend? Because I think this could be a really valuable lesson for all of us. What would we track our time for? What would be a good time to give us a sense of why we need to call Anne?
Right. Well, I would track it certainly for probably a month.
Wow. Okay.
Right? Because you kind of got to get through. A day's not enough because you're not doing the same thing every day.
Right. Yes.
Right? You got to sort of get through some form of a cycle. In this instance, I actually had her track it for closer to 60 days.
Yeah.
But to get some decent meaty data.
Yes.
Enough to say, hey, look, let's make some changes. And
so we can track our time and really kind of put that eye on our own business. What other tips do you have that would be great for authors and entrepreneurs in a service, small businesses? What would be a couple of actions that we could walk away with and start to really avoid some profit leaks? Or how do we even find them in the first place? Maybe
as I said earlier, I think sort of step one is decide whether this is a business or a hobby. And part of that definition to me is, are you keeping the books versus just collecting a box of receipts for the tax person at the end of the year?
Mm-hmm.
And so the first step, sorry about that.
That's okay. It's people needing your help, Anne.
I guess so.
They need your eye on their business.
It was on. It's usually not. But and it's far enough away I can't reach it. But so a little background music. And there it goes again. The first thing I would do is set up, get something like QuickBooks.
Yes.
And start using it at the same time. Don't be beholden to necessarily you as the business owner being the one doing that task.
Mm-hmm.
But make sure it gets done.
gets done. And do you have, I remember I was at an entrepreneur training program years and years ago when I started my business, and one of the speakers was, I think she did sort of like business planning. She wasn't in the accounting world. And she was saying stories of how many people actually packaged up their receipts like in laundry baskets and brought them to an accountant. And I thought, I'm never going to be that person. It's easy for businesses to, a month goes by, 2 months goes by, and people's invoices aren't going out. When you think about being on top of your numbers and avoiding profit leaks, how regularly should people be doing their books, as you were saying? How often should people be in there?
Two different questions there.
Okay.
One question was, to me anyway, how often should you be invoicing?
Yeah.
And you should be invoicing at least once a month. And it depends a little bit on the nature of your business, but I'll give you an example on that too. I had, and this is a little different service business, but a snow plowing, right? And the guy he didn't have any money in the bank because he didn't get around to invoicing for the storms for like 10 days. Meanwhile, he's got to pay his plow drivers. So the objective is have the money come in as soon as possible and pay it out as slowly as legitimately okay, right? And so you want to kind of match the ins and the outs. So putting off invoicing, bad idea, because that's where the money comes from. Yeah. And the more you put it off, the longer it takes to bring it in. Tracking your expenses, I would say the book should be touched at least once a month, and ideally probably twice a month, depending on the size of the business and how many transactions you're talking about. But
Gotcha.
and as the business gets bigger, more often than that. But minimum.
For some entrepreneurs, is it fair to say that they might need to just like schedule themselves time on their Google Calendar, whatever they're using, to actually make it a priority in their business?
I think the word might is probably unnecessary. I think they do need to.
They do need to.
Yeah.
I love how specific you are, Anne. Ooh, yeah. So we've got kind of tracking this time, being in our books a couple of times a month, invoicing immediately, don't drag it out, which you're saying is going to increase that ongoing cash flow, extending however you best can, the payment of invoices. If there was one action you could give everybody listening today, because we're going to continue having conversations with you about this topic, because I know that your goal is to really help businesses be profitable and be around there for a long time to be able to bring their gift to the world and make a difference. Right.
And I want them to understand what the fundamentals are of what they need to know on the business side. I don't want them to just sort of rely on, oh, well, my bookkeeper said it was okay. I don't understand it, but my bookkeeper said it was okay. To me, that's not okay.
Yeah.
The understanding is key. You may not have to do the specific task, but it's your business and you really have the responsibility to understand how to read this stuff and know why it's valuable to you.
Yes.
So you can use it.
Love that. And you raised a really good point with that client who was a lawyer. That client's passion was, and genius was as a lawyer, not as an accountant, not as a bookkeeper, not as a financial expert. And I think that happens a lot in the entrepreneur world. I mean, I look at why I started my first business. I had, a passion for helping people work through conflict, and I opened up a dispute resolution company. And I'll be really honest, here, Vulnerability Day for Charmaine, the first year, this is going back 22 years, so I want to say that. It was a long time ago, and I didn't know what I didn't know. I also didn't know about coaches and people to help, so I tried to learn it all. And what you said with the lawyer was really true for me, that my genius was in helping people resolve their disputes, and training people in companies to manage conflict and communicate effectively. It wasn't in accounting, and it wasn't in understanding this. And I remember the first 6 months of my business, and were so painful because I was so uncomfortable asking people for money. And in the world that we worked in a mediation practice, that at that time I was it. I didn't have an assistant. I didn't have anyone.
Right.
So I would finish the session and then I've got to talk about money, and it was so uncomfortable. So I just didn't. And there
Right.
was a very big profit leak. And
Right.
in 6 months, I thought to myself, I need to learn how to deal with this, or put a system, or hire someone to do this.
Or
Something
hire
has to
somebody.
change.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you don't need, I'll be the first to say, I'm not an accountant and I'm not a bookkeeper.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to put, if anything, I'm an analyst.
Yeah.
Right. Bookkeepers in particular put numbers in boxes. That's their role. Hopefully they put them in the right boxes. Accountants do similar things, and they often have a tax perspective on things, right? And so their objective is, how can I minimize taxes? My role is, okay, let's either, I mean, certainly I'm able to look at the numbers and say, well, these can't possibly be in the right boxes, so let's address that first. But once they're in the right boxes, what do they mean?
Gotcha.
And how can we optimize the situation? You know, are your expenses too high? Are your product or service expenses too high? Is the relationship off between the price and the expense? And so is that an expense issue? Is it a pricing issue? Is it both? Is it a process issue? You know, there's, it's, I will, you know, slaughter analogies all over the place, but it's like peeling an onion, right? You go layer by layer by layer. Where can we improve in this area? Where can we improve in that area? So.
Well, I think, you know, the title of your business says a lot about what you do. And I see, and as I'm getting to know you more, and I see that you also bring an incredible strength of strategy and forward vision to a company. So when you're working with someone, you're really looking at also the need for systems and processes. But you're also very forward thinking in terms of, you know, what's that down the road picture look like, so you can help people get there by the decisions that they make, by the planning that they do, what they say yes and no to, and all the strategies you've talked about today.
It's interesting. There's something I sort of live by, which is that there are a lot of consultants that think you can look just at the 30,000 foot view and figure out what to do. And I know that's not true. You really have to look at both the 30,000 foot view and the 3 foot view and understand them both, whatever. And it's the combination of the two, right? You got to get into the detail, but you've got to be able to step back and say, well, wait a second, where am I going and how am I trying to get there? And, you know, that's kind of where I come in.
That's a great point. I mean, so many entrepreneurs I meet are so, they are so inspired and moved by their big vision and by the dream that they're trying to put into action. So they're often in that very forward thinking mode, and not in the, what do I do like right now? What's my first step?
Right.
How am I going to pay for that? And then there's other people that are so entrenched in the details that they're not moving ahead because they can't ever operationalize that vision. So I love that you kind of play in both worlds to help entrepreneurs be successful.
I do. I find it very fun.
Yay. Well, we are going to continue having conversations with Anne, because this is a really important conversation, and one of the commitments that the Evolutionary Business Council and the Global Influence Summit have is that we know that there are so many amazing entrepreneurs and small businesses out there who have an important mission. They are going to serve the world in a really important way, and if their business is struggling, that can happen. Exactly. And so I love that you're on this journey with us, Anne. And again, thank you so much for being a sponsor of the GIS. And we're going to have another conversation real soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
And Anne, I need you to give your website out so people can go
Oh,
and follow you and read everything that
how
you're
did I
doing.
let that get by?
Well, how did I let that get by?
Yeah. It is www.ionyourbusiness.net. And all those words are spelled out. EYEYOURBUSINNESS.net.
Awesome. Ionyourbusiness.net.
Yes.
And also Anne is on Twitter, and she's also on Facebook. Make sure you check out her blogs. There's a couple that I've been circulating lately because they are just such rich content, and
Thank
really.
you.
And so make sure you're checking those out because Anne is offering some really great strategies to help you avoid profit leaks in your business. Thank you, Anne, with Eye on Your Business, for being with us today.
Thank you.